Hey guys, it's Ollie, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today we're going to be talking about the differences between snails and slugs. Before we get into it, my voice probably sounds really weird. I am sick right now, but that's not going to stop me from talking about snails, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Many people will see a slug and assume that it is a snail that lost its shell, sort of like a hermit crab can take off its shell and then get a new shell that fits. A lot of people think it's that way with snails and slugs. However, that's not the case. It is a fair assumption. I mean, they look the same other than the shell. Both mollusks have eye stalks, downward-facing mouths, a long and strong foot that is lubricated that they use to move, and overall pretty similar diets. However, they are different animals. And just to throw you off a little bit more, there is a third option called the semi-slug. Semi-slugs are these weird hybrid-looking gastropods that are pretty confusing to us. Slugs, snails, and semi-slugs are all mollusks. They are related to things like clams, oysters, and other shellfish. So to make it a little bit less confusing, let's set aside semi-slugs and just talk about snails versus slugs. And then I will talk about semi-slugs and where they fit on this whole conundrum. So generally speaking, there's not a huge difference in snails versus slugs. The obvious one is, of course, the shell. Snails are mostly known for their hard spiraled shells that are on their back that they can retreat into. Snails are born with a shell. It's very fragile when they're first born, and as they grow, they will build onto it. It's actually built, and it holds all of their organs, and they cannot come out of the shell. Snails will eat calcium and put that calcium towards building their shell. The snail shell protects it from predators as well as from drying out in different weather environments. Slugs obviously don't have these shells, though. Slugs do still have a mantle. It's that slightly thicker part of flesh behind their head that you've probably noticed if you looked at a slug. And they can retreat into this mantle for protection against a predator. They kind of look like little blobs when they do this, and I don't think it really does much. And in some slug species, there is still a small piece of shell in the mantle. This vestigial shell is mostly used for calcium storage, and is mostly just a leftover from evolution. Speaking of evolution, I always assumed as a kid that the slug came first and then the snail. Turns out it's actually the snail and then the slug. So what is the evolutionary advantage of losing this armor? Well, the loss of the shell actually gave these slugs an advantage on motion. Slugs are now able to get into crevices they couldn't really get into before because of their shell, as well as moving slightly faster. Plus, slugs don't have to intake as much calcium, considering they don't have a big shell that they need to build onto and keep healthy. And the slug's organs are just kept throughout the foot as well as throughout the body. Losing the shell also leads slugs to be nocturnal, whereas snails are active 24/7 on and off, looking for food in between sleeps. This is because it's more moist at night than it is during the day, and there's less of a chance of the slug drying out. So both slugs and snails have an equal amount of negative traits and positive traits when it comes to these. They're just kind of opposite from each other. So now that we've gone over those differences and why snails evolved into slugs, let's go ahead and talk about the semi-slug. So, like I said before, semi-slugs look like some weird hybrid between a snail and a slug, and that's kind of what they are in a way. The semi-slug represents the intermediate stage of evolution for these mollusks. It does have a shell, but it is way too small for the actual animal to retreat into. The shell is also sometimes covered by a flap of the mantle, so it's not always super visible, but in some species it is super visible. In either case, it is never going to be big enough for the semi-slug to retreat into for protection from predators or from drying out. Plus, it still has the need for calcium to keep their shell healthy, and it still can't fit into super tight spaces like slugs can because of the shell. So, semi-slugs have 4 negative things in regards to its shell. So the question is, how are they still around? How have they not evolved into complete slugs or died out yet? And with most things with mollusks, it's still pretty unknown, but according to Dr. Timothy Pierce, the head of section of mollusks at Carnegie Museum of Natural History, most semi-slugs seem to have evolved on warm oceanic islands 35 degrees of the equator. Here it rains every day at least once a day, so this semi-slug doesn't really have to worry about drying out, and can remain active during these times of rain. And many islands don't have a ton of predators, so they don't have to worry about their shell for protection against that either. Now, most of these islands are also volcanic, meaning that their soil isn't super calcium rich. However, this calcium would become available according to Dr. Pierce because of the seashells washing up on the shores. He describes this as relaxed selection, meaning that the semi-slugs on these islands simply just don't have the external pressure to evolve into slugs. They don't have a need to evolve, and they don't just die out just because they don't make sense to us. So that's why they're still around. Alright, and that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. I tried to do a decent amount of research on it because it was super fascinating and I went down this giant rabbit hole. This wasn't even supposed to be the video for this week. I learned about semi-slugs and I had to share it with you, so here we are. Do go check out the Carnage Natural History Museum's YouTube channel. I really enjoy watching Dr. Pierce's content, so I will put that wherever, and maybe even on the end card if you want to go check them out. I highly recommend it if you're into more of the sciencey stuff. Dr. Pierce is pretty cool. He also has some online blog type stuff, so go check that out if you would like. However, there is also a plastic surgeon with the same name, so when you look up Dr. Timothy Pierce, either look up the name of the museum or just put in the words snail and he'll come up. So anyway, give this video a like for the algorithm, comment down below what other topics you want me to talk about with snails, and I will probably do it. And remember that all of my links, including my Instagram, my art Instagram, my Facebook group, and my wife and I's Etsy shop will be down in the description below, so go check those out if you are interested. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you are into this kind of content or really any animal kind of content. I upload every single Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, but you can hit the bell if you don't want to remember that. And as always, I'll see you guys next week. Bye.